The first thing that I always need to do before we talk about anything is we always need to define what it is. So the big question here is, what is resilience? What is this word? In Chinese, it's called 韧性. Resilience is the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. Now, this is a very interesting definition because there's a few things I want to pick out here. First one is this is very subjective based on your understanding of the situation that you're facing. For example, what does it mean to recover from something? My idea of recovering from a disaster is different from your ability to recover or your definition of recovering from a disaster. What does it mean to adjust easily? For you and for me, it could be very different. The same thing when it comes to misfortune. One person's misfortune or setback is like nothing to another person. Perhaps it means that for the other person, they are just more resilient. The basic fundamental idea of resilience is that you're living your normal life. Things are kind of expected the way they are. Boom, something drops on you, some sort of disaster or setback. And then some people can bounce back more easily than others. So some people are, for the smallest things, they're very affected. And then they just cannot continue on with their life, right? Because they're very troubled. And some people, it does seem like they can quickly rebound or recover from or adjust easily to the winds of change or the winds of misfortune. Fundamentally, what I'm going to present here in this session is that through the stories and also the frameworks, it is like a muscle. It is like something that it needs to happen to you. And everybody comes across trouble in our lives, whether it's personal or career or work. And we just have to try to get stronger and recover from it. And the more that things happen to you, the more that you will be able to take the chances to recover or adjust easily the next time. This is a huge disaster. I'm just showing you an example. This is an earthquake a few years ago in Syria. That is a capital D disaster. It is something that is huge. Some people can bounce back more than others from a mental perspective. Some people may never recover from that. Of course, this is a very extreme example. The most common example of a setback or a disaster is something that happens to us mentally. Every time someone cuts you off on the street, when you're walking, when you're driving, every time someone insults you, there's some sort of setback that people have different degrees of being able to recover from. Just to repeat it again, resilience is the ability, your ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. Having said that, there are many different frameworks for dealing with disaster or setbacks. First, I want to share with you my own framework through my own experience on how to deal with setbacks in my personal career. This is what I think is something that I have generalized through my years and years of living in China, also elsewhere. And please let me know later if you think this works for you or you have some modified version of this. But essentially, my framework for developing resilience is really three parts. The number one thing is that you have to experience failure. You have to actually fail. Some people, through your own framing, mental framing or circumstances, may have a more smooth life than others. I just said that resilience is like a muscle. So you have to reach the failure. You have to hit it in order for you to have some sort of possible recovery. Now, I'm hoping that nobody experiences an earthquake in their home, but we're talking about minor setbacks that happen to you. The second thing is that when you experience the failure, you have to take the time and the opportunity to recover and reflect. So for me, reflect means I have to think about what actually happened and could that have been prevented? So we're talking about what are things that I can control, what are things that I cannot control. And then we can talk about the actual act of recovery. Everyone has different ways to recover. Like when we talk about recovery, we typically think of it from a physical perspective. But are there ways that you can recover by trying to rest your brain in some way? Everybody has a different way. So what I'm saying is that you have to be able to experience failure. You have to be able to think about how would you deal with it or process it next time. And I'm also going to make the argument here that you probably just need to experience failure multiple times. Even if you don't recover and reflect, just developing that muscle for hitting the failure and then still being alive mentally and physically after that is probably the key. Then there's a third one, which I think is my secret weapon, and I'll talk about that in my story, which I'll be talking about very soon, which is Even way before I even knew the term negative visualization, I was using negative visualization. To put it in a very simple words, you basically just imagine what's the worst that can happen and step through it. So if you're going to have a very tough meeting with your boss, right? It's going to be like this. You basically imagine what's the worst thing that can happen. You're going to deliver a speech. I'm going to have a session here today with you all. I'm going to imagine what's the worst thing that could happen. Maybe I totally panic, I freeze, the internet doesn't work. So you try to imagine the worst and you step through it. And what I have found in my career is that, first of all, your brain, if you actually step through it, your brain actually thinks that it happened. So it's a way of developing resilience. But also, if you can imagine the worst that can happen and you actually have a mitigation or plan B for what happens, and you step through it and you realize it's not that bad, then you can actually deal with it. That actually builds your resilience muscle. So for me, it's really the three-step process. You have to experience the failure, you have to almost welcome it, you have to reflect, you have to recover, and you have to always imagine and ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? Anytime, even if you go into every meeting, I would even argue, just imagine what's the worst that can happen. Because if you imagine what's the worst that can happen, you can then come up with a plan. Many of us are just too reactive in our lives. So start small. Everything that you're doing, even on a very micro level, like you're going to have a tough conversation or a tough meeting or a speech, just imagine what's the worst that can happen. In fact, if there's anything you can just remember from today, from my sharing, it's just what's the worst that can happen. All right, so let me just quickly talk about my career a little bit and some stories. I have these circles. I'm just trying to tell you that what you think is hard, life actually gets harder, but you think it actually gets easier over time because you get stronger with your resilience. This is back in 2010. I was living in Canada and I was working a corporate job. One day my boss calls me into his office. He says, James, I'm quitting and I'm going to join a startup. I'm going to be one of the co-founders. Do you want to join me? And do you know what I thought to myself in 2010? This is like 15 years ago. I thought, oh my God, this is so risky. This is so risky. What if I join the startup and it doesn't work out? I don't have a job. It's almost like a joke looking back on it. But I also understand that for many of us, we are just not able to challenge ourselves and also ask, what's the worst that could happen? Because then I just ask myself, what's the worst? Well, I go there, the startup fails. I go back to my corporate job. I find another job. So it's not that bad. So I can step through it. So that's what I did. I went to the Canadian startup. Guess what? One of my first trips, I went to Beijing. I went to mainland China for the first time. I fell in love with China. I decided, all right, I'm going to do this. So you never know. Sometimes if you take a chance, like some crazy stuff happens, some fortune happens because of what you think is hard. If you don't put yourself out there, nothing is ever going to happen. I love saying this even as a very 内向, introverted person. If you don't go out there and just talk to somebody or experience something, nothing's going to happen. So that's the first thing that I think was a very pivotal point in my career, in my life. Moved to China. So I visited Beijing. It was great. I was like, what's it going to take for me to work in Beijing? I interview for jobs. I get a job offer over the phone. This is like 2011. So they didn't even have Zoom or Tenchin Hui. They didn't even know what I look like. I did like a couple phone interviews and they're like, James, do you want the product manager job in Beijing? And I said, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is that I fail in China, right? But I got a cool story out of it. I got a cool experience and I just moved back to Canada and just find another job. So again, what's the worst that could happen? Almost nothing. And I'm super young back then. I mean, I'm old now, but I was in my early 30s. I have nothing to lose except for my time and humiliation, maybe that I didn't succeed in my job. So 2012, I remember this is like January 2012. I moved to mainland China, I moved to Beijing, and guess what? I'm still here today. That was like 13 years ago. Okay, well, pretty easy, right? You just move your job, you move to a different country. I know for some of us, we may never have done that, but everybody has different risk tolerance. Well, guess what? Then I'm in the corporate world. In 2012, I did okay. I got promoted. In 2014 is when I moved to Microsoft. And I had a really tough time in Microsoft. I don't talk about this publicly that much, but man, I had such a tough time working with my boss. The culture was very political, and I got thrown under the bus a couple of times, metaphorically. What do I have to do? I have to get tougher. So of course I could have quit, but I also tried to develop something. So in the time that I was at Microsoft, which is for about 3 or 4 years, I actually worked my way up to management. I ended up becoming a director of product. I ended up leading a team of product managers. I eventually left the team, transferred to another team at Microsoft that wasn't mean to me and it's better fit. And so I figured out how to make it work. Okay, so there's more resilience there. The next phase, and I think this is the final phase, or maybe the phase I'm still in, is just betting on myself. So I would call this the 2017 to now. And of course, you're thinking like 2017 to now, that's 8 long years. That is a really long time. But there's a couple of things that happen here. First of all, I went and I built my own startups. I quit Microsoft, quit my stable salary. I found a co-founder. We built a team from 2 to like 40 people. And I tried to make it happen for about 5 years. We raised money. It didn't work out in the end after 5 years, but I'm incredibly proud of my experiences as an entrepreneur, building something from 0 to 1, scaling a team, and putting everything that I had under my previous experience into this new role, including working with a multicultural team because we had people in the US, we had people like me in China, we had people in Europe. It was a very diverse crowd, and I had to use all the things that I learned from corporate and also unlearn a lot of things, corporate to startup. The next thing is, well, the startup didn't work, so I have to go back to corporate. Let me just give you the short version of the story. I went back to corporate. I really didn't want to do it. So I actually quit my last corporate job like 2 months ago. So I'm now basically back to doing freelance full time. So I'm doing stuff like this workshop. I'm doing stuff like my 自媒体. I'm doing stuff like the training. I'm really happy doing it because I'm working way harder than I was in corporate. But I feel like it's actually making a difference. I can be here today to share with you stories about resilience. So all I'm trying to say, bet on yourself and always imagine what's the worst that can happen. And the more you challenge yourself, the more you're going to grow. And if you look at these circles, the challenges start very small. So maybe some of you are in the big circle, some of you are in the small circle. Find a way to challenge yourself. And guess what? You can challenge yourself in different ways. I'm going to talk about something that I'm very passionate about, which also is very much part of resilience. And that is running. I love running marathons. So the one on the left, I look a little bit happier. The one on the right is my all-time favorite photo. I'm in pain as I am trying to finish the last 500 meters of the half marathon that I PB'd this year. Really proud of it. But I think what I did in my time as an entrepreneur, as a person, actually transferred over to the world of running because you develop this muscle of resilience that is portable. This is actually why I learned later on that a lot of entrepreneurs got into long distance running because it's really like punishing yourself. And after we do the startups, we're like, this is actually not that bad. It's just physical pain. Yeah, if you bet on yourself, if you just welcome the pain in running, we call this the pain cave. If you welcome the pain cave, you're going to come out. Okay, don't kill yourself. Don't get injured. I have gotten injured before too, but this is all resilience. So this was the Tianjin Marathon I ran 1 week ago. This is actually where I PR'd. And I'm 43 years old, so I'm very proud of that. My progress, I ran my first half marathon 20 years ago. I finished it in 3 hours. This year, I ran it in 1 hour, 47 minutes. That's the one where I'm wearing the green shirt. I look like I'm in pain, but I did it. Full marathon, I started running 2 years ago. My first full marathon was 5 hours and 35 minutes. 1 week ago in Tianjin, I finished it in 4 hours, 7 minutes. I wanted to go under 4 hours, but I chickened out. I was like, this is going to be too much pain to go under 4 hours. Okay, so let's take it easy, James. You already PB'd. All I'm trying to say here is that, look, I grew up overweight. I couldn't run like 6 laps in high school. I have no athletic ability whatsoever. In running, they call that 我没有一毛天赋. Everything that I did in running is just hard work. That's all it is. I really believe that anyone can just do this if you just train the right way. I'm still not very fast, by the way, because my friends are like running like under 3 hours marathon are laughing at me like, James, are you talking about a 4-hour marathon? But it's all relative. It's all about self-improvement. That's what matters. The one thing which I talk about now for running, which is related to resilience, is my breakthrough last year, this year. Rather than try to avoid the pain, you lean into the pain. If you can imagine the worst, if you can feel the worst, and sometimes you actually feel the worst, then you can do it. 1 year ago, I couldn't run so fast because I was trying to avoid the pain. Now when I run, I just expect the pain. I expect the pain is just going to come and hit me in the face. Because now I can visualize stepping through it, I can do it. It's like it already happened to me. Lean into the pain. The second one, I think it's like super obvious, is just like, yeah, people say it's mental. This is bullshit, okay? You still have to train. You still have to prepare. You can't just be like, I'm just going to get up and run a marathon. You have to prepare. And when you have the preparation meets the opportunity, that's when you can have a chance for breakthrough. The other thing is just, I am just really effing stubborn. If I run badly, I just analyze it. What can I do better next time? Maybe I didn't take the right gel. I didn't take the salt tablet. I didn't warm up properly. Everything in life is a micro optimization. It all adds up. I'm just really stubborn. The reason I can do Zmeiti is because I can just put out videos like a machine. People give you this really bad advice, like just put it out. But no, you have to put it out and also adjust. So just to kind of wrap things up, I would definitely just want to reiterate that resilience, and this is also backed by some studies, resilience is a muscle that gets tested. It's going to get stronger with usage. So that's something you have to constantly test yourself against. It's like going to the gym to tire your muscles to get so they get bigger. Resilience is a combination of the mindset and the practice. It is the willingness to imagine what's the worst that can happen, to step through the pain, but also you have to practice it. It's not enough just to manifest and just to imagine that you're going to be able to do it. That is a big part of it. But you also have to go through it for real. You have to take those chances in life. Just quickly repeating my formula, how to develop resistance, 3 steps. Experience failure, recover and reflect, and negative visualization.